down there. Book of Job, we're in chapter 12. So last week we heard from Zophar. Zophar was the cruelest of the friends of Job. And so we're going to get to hear a little bit of Job's response this evening. And so chapters 12, 13, and 14 is Job's response to his three friends. And he doesn't just come back and address Zophar. Job's response here is addressing all of his friends, all of what they've had to say thus far. And it's pretty funny how Job begins this now. So let's look. He says, verse 1, chapter 12, it says, "And Job answered and said, No doubt, but ye are the people, and wisdom shall die with you." Job uses the ancient art of sarcasm here. Here, these three, now remember, you've got to remember where Job is. Job is in the ash heap. He's been mourning. He's literally taking scraps of pottery and scratching his sores. He's lost all of his children. He's lost all of his money. The respect of his wife. I mean, he's lost everything. And his three friends have journeyed from their respective cities or locations, and they've mourned with him for several days. And for several days they remained silent. And then Job opened up and said, "I just wish I'd never been born." And then that just gave the green light for his friends just to, one after the other, it seems like they've attacked him with accusation. Accusation, a little underhanded accusation, except for Zophar. Zophar sort of just goes in and says, "Look, this is why you've sinned big time, and God punishes sinners." And so Job says, "No doubt, you're the top of the heap pile. No doubt, you're the wisest people ever. I mean, wisdom itself will die with you. I mean, you are the all in all." This is sarcasm. We don't see where God condemns Job's response either. And there are several people in the Bible that use the art of sarcasm. Elijah, for example. You recall when Elijah was talking to the prophets of Baal, the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, and they were praying down fire, and they would say, "Oh, Baal, send the fire, send the fire." And Elijah sit back and he go, maybe Baal's using the bathroom. You think maybe he's in the bathroom? And so he used sarcasm. And I believe that it has its place. I don't think that we should ever be unkind, but I think it has its place. I probably have told this before, but I was a speaker for World Changers for a couple of years, and World Changers flew me to New York, and I spoke to some teenagers there. And in the World Changers is a ministry operated by the Southern Baptist Convention. And World Changers, I don't know, anybody familiar with World Changers in here? It's teenagers all around the world who go and work on ministry projects. It's wonderful ministry. I mean, I thought, man, wonderful ministry. They work on projects and they witness to the neighborhoods they're working in. But they have these big arenas. They have these teenagers come in by the hundreds and sometimes by the thousands. And man, the Lord gave me this wonderful opportunity to go and preach to these teenagers, and I loved it. And I was preaching in New York, and I said something from behind the pulpit that just hair-lipped the rector of World Changer International. I said, I had the audacity to say, "Jesus will be Lord when Islam is a Muslim." Hello? A Muslim is as kin to a terrorist as an oink is to a pig. Huh? and Jesus is Lord. And I got reprimanded with a written warning, and they said that they did not want me to, that I was not a good representative. I was not a good diplomatic representative for World Changers because I insulted Islam. That's from a Southern Baptist organization. I said I insulted Islam by saying that Jesus is Lord. So sarcasm, I believe, does have its place. But by the way, I said, keep your reprimand. I'll resign. So that was my last meeting with World Changers. But Job here says, no doubt, but ye are the people, and wisdom shall die with you. Sarcasm. But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Yea, who knoweth not such things as these? Job says, quit talking down to me. Quit. I'm not inferior to you. And by the way, most of what you've had to say, everybody knows it's common sense. Most of what the three friends and the way they tried to illustrate their truth, Job said, it's common sense. You've not spoken any profundity to me. Everything has been common sense. Have you ever felt like when you were in conversation with someone that they were belittling you? Have you ever felt that? Have you ever felt that someone was speaking in a condescending way to you? Sure. I mean, it happens, and this is the way Job felt. He said, "I'm not inferior to you." I don't know. This is the Holy Spirit bringing this to my mind. But I was just telling a couple this today, that my wife and I, when we first got married, we were pulling out of the parking lot in Sylvester, Georgia, at B.C. Moore's and Company. I believe there's a grocery store in that little shopping center there now, but we were pulling out of that shopping center, and I looked at my wife and I said, "Put your seatbelt on." And she put her seatbelt on, and I could feel the stare as we're going down the road. I could feel the stare. And I said, "What's your problem?" And she said, "I am not a child." I said, "Okay, you're not." I said, she said, "You told me to put my seatbelt on." She said, "And I'm not a child." Brother Brian, God did not give me the wisdom of Daniel or the wisdom of Job. So I made things worse. I said, "No, you're not. Quit acting like one." Look, what? And my daughter's back there. She's heard that story plenty of times. Okay? What was she upset about? She felt like I was being condescending. Of course, I wasn't. I was just being blunt. Put your seatbelt on, right? But she felt that way. Job felt, and I believe rightly so, that these men were speaking down to him. He says, everything that you've said is common sense. I'm not inferior to you. Look at verse 4. He says, "I am as one mocked of his neighbor, who calleth upon God, and he answereth him. The just upright man is laughed to scorn." Job said, "I am a joke. I have become a joke." And here's the sad part, is Job said, I've not become a joke to my enemies. I've become a joke to my friends. Job felt like they were giving him bumper sticker It is better, I'm going to say this, I might get in trouble for this, but it is better to not say anything than to give someone that pat on the back when they're going through some type of terminal sickness or depression or whatever it may be, to just pat them on the back and say, well, you know, we all have bad days. It doesn't help. That bumper, what I call bumper sticker, it doesn't help people. And this is what Job said. Job said, listen, I've become as one mocked of his neighbor. The just upright man is laughed to scorn. Verse 5. This is Job's response. This is the way he feels. He that is ready to slip with his feet is as a lamp despised in the thought of him that is at ease. In other words, these lamps, when someone was ready to retire at night, they just blow the lamp out. They discard it. They get rid of it. Why? Because they're safe at home. They have no more use, no more value. That's the way Job felt. Job felt as if his friends were addressing him as a man that had no more use and no more value. They had no idea that Job's best days were in front of him. Job's most prosperous days were still ahead of him. They had no idea. But Job felt as if he were being... And by the way, their counsel to Job, he felt, was the counsel to a man that had no use and no value. In other words, Job, this is it. This is the prescription. This is the reason why God is judging you. You need to get right or die. Essentially, that was Zophar's words to him. But where's the value? Look at this, verse 6, the Tabernacles of Robbers. Well, I love this. This is where Job really affects the theology of suffering here to his friends. The tabernacles of robbers prosper, and they that provoke God are secure, into whose hands God bringeth abundantly. There is a contradiction to the way they had been thinking. All three friends came to Job and said, Job, God rewards good and he punishes evil. And so therefore, based on that theology, the reason why you're suffering is because you must be evil. Job says, look around. Do you see anybody that's wicked that is prospering? Sure you do. Sure you do. You can think of someone right now in your mind that you know is wicked and yet seems to be prosperous. Maybe they're not personally prosperous, but they're financially prosperous. The same can be said, though, of the Christian who may be like Paul. You know, Paul, would you say Paul is a successful Christian? Close to the Lord? Walked with God? Lived in prison. Paul did not live in the Taj Mahal. He didn't have 3 Cadillacs and the Rolls Royce and the Rolex watch. He lived in prison. So here's the theology that Job is learning. And by the way, this is something that inherently Job knew. Because Job is going through this with God, he's learning this, he's observing this. And so he's asking these questions. In verse 7 he says, But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee, or speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee, and the fishes of the sea shall declare unto thee. So what is nature supposed to be teaching us? Look at verse 9. Who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? In other words, God is in control. So whether the godly suffer or the wicked prosper, God is in control. God is in control. Job was learning. He was learning to look to God, because his friends, certainly their theology was not in line. And beforehand, I believe Job was in the same line of thinking as his friends. He's learning this for himself. Look at verse 10. In whose hand is the soul of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind. In other words, God is in control of both the bad people and the good people. The good and the bad. They're all in the hand of the Lord. Look at this, verse 11. Doth not the ear try words, and the mouth taste his meat? With the ancient is wisdom, and in length of days understanding. With him is wisdom and strength. He hath counsel and understanding. God is wise, and here's sort of the hinge in this entire chapter, because Job is about to explain God is in control, and you look at the natural law, or the natural way things happen in this world, and you'll see that God is in control of it all. Look, verse 14, it says, Behold, he breaketh down, and it cannot be built again. He shutteth up a man, and there can be no opening. Behold, he breaketh down, and it cannot be built again. What's the opposite of being broken? What's the opposite? Built. Here Job says, if God breaks it, he'll break it where it can't be built. Okay? Look, he says, and it cannot be built again. He shutteth up a man, speaking of imprisoning a man, and there can be no opening. Behold, he withholdeth the waters, and they dry up. Also he sendeth them out, and they overturn the earth. Now, verse 16, watch this carefully now. With him is strength and wisdom. The deceived and the deceiver are his. Job makes a really cool theological point. All of his friends here have sat in positions of condemnation to Job. And Job says, God is the judge. He's the judge. He's the judge. I don't know why. Job still don't understand why he's suffering. But he knows that God is the judge. In other words, God knows why he's suffering. If you don't know why, you can trust God. When you don't know why, you can trust God. He says, by the way, when he says that the deceived and the deceiver are his, that is qualified by the fact that with God there is strength and wisdom. I would rather be on the wisdom side of the Lord than the strength side. The deceiver will be judged. God is not mocked. Verse 17, he leadeth counselors away, spoiled, and maketh the judges fools. Now, who do you think Job's talking about? Yeah. He's talking about his friends. He talks about it in verse 19 too. Let's look at verse 18. He says, he looseth the bond of kings, and girdeth their loins with a girdle. In other words, he takes the clothes off of a king and puts on a servant's robe. God, in other words, God is in control. He's the judge. Verse 19, he leadeth princes away spoiled, and overthroweth the mighty. He removeth, oh, I love verse 20. He removeth away the speech of the trusty. I like that word. He removeth away the speech of the trusty, and taketh away the understanding of the aged. Now listen to this. No one is immune to being humbled by God's wisdom. That's what he's saying here. No one is immune to being humbled by God's wisdom. I don't care how long you've lived on planet Earth. I don't care how many degrees or what God has given you in life, how smart a person is. All of us can still be humbled by the wisdom of God. I said about, I made a statement a couple years ago. It's been since I've been here. I made a statement a couple years ago that I said I've lost all shock value. Lost all shock value. There's nothing that someone could bring me that would make me go, whoa. Because I thought I had seen it all. And the Lord brought me a counseling cave where I said, oh, no, I have not seen it all. Not by a long shot. Not by a long shot. Pastor called me up and said, are you sitting down, preacher? I said, should I be sitting down? Well, I'm okay. And he said, I've got a man in my church who believes, or he feels like he's a woman. I said, well, you need to take that. He says, his name is David. He says, he's a Bible college graduate. I said, take David to the doctor, get a DNA test, and they did, and they got the DNA test and brought it back, and said, David, Brother Johnny, are you really sitting down? I said, what's going on? He said, well, we took him, and I went with him as his pastor, got his DNA test, and said, David's a girl. I said, excuse me? He said, David was born in Mexico, and he was born with an appendage, and the doctor did surgery there in Mexico, and they decided they said it would be less trouble to go ahead and make David, or to make this baby a boy, but his DNA, his chromosomes are that of a female. David's birth certificate says female. His chromosome is female. His doctor said, I thought you knew you were female. I didn't want to bring it up because I didn't think it was ethical. I didn't think it was the right thing to do. I thought you wanted to be identified as a man, so I've been referring to you as a man. David, his grandmother raised him. David said, no, I've been thinking all my life I've been a boy, because a doctor decided to play God. So the pastor said, what should I do? I said, well, first of all, quit calling her David. I said, she's a she. She's a she. I mean, because she was born a girl. Right? You can change your clothes, but you can't change your chromosome. XX or XY. Right? I said, you need to protect her, because it's going to be hard in life. need to tell the church. I said, put her in a dress. You need to tell the church. You need to be a pastor. Shepherd her in this thing. Shepherd her. I said, tell the church. He said, I'm not telling the church, you are. Flew me to tell the church. I flew to Oklahoma and told the church. Did you know they had a quarter of the people walk out and leave that church? She was a girl. Wasn't a boy changed into a girl, it was a girl. I told you you ain't seen everything. Huh? There are so many things in life. Every person, every one of us can be humbled by a new experience, learning God's wisdom. And but by the way, she made my wife and I a quilt, a blanket that we use on the end of our bed to this day. When the pastor visited that young lady for the first time, thinking it was a young man, a Bible college graduate, by the way, they walked into the house, and the house was full of mannequins, all with Victorian dresses on, and it looked creepy. And the pastor said, "What do you have these here for?" And at the time, who he thought was a young man said, I make them. Not the mannequins, but make the outfits. And isn't that something? That even through all that, it's just like the experiment they did years ago. God made them in the beginning. He made them male and female, and we're different. You give little girls Tonka trucks, and they'll have a mama truck and a daddy truck and a baby truck. You give little boys baby dolls, and they'll play war with them. It's the truth. We're made different. 21. He said, he poureth contempt upon princes, and weakeneth the strength of the mighty. He discovereth deep things out of darkness. Now, I believe Job is getting some hope here. Here he's testifying of the Lord. He discovereth deep things out of darkness, and bringeth out the light, the shadow of death. Job is saying God is in control. God is judge. And by the way, God reveals things. When he's talking about the light here, he's talking about the knowledge, the secret things. God reveals them out of darkness. I believe this was a first glimmer of hope as Job is testifying the fact that, you know what, I don't know why I'm suffering, but God does know, and maybe he'll tell me. Maybe he'll reveal it. Verse 23, he increaseth the nations and destroyeth them. He enlargeth the nations and straighteneth them again. He taketh away the heart of the chief of the people of the earth, and causeth them to wander in a wilderness where there is no way. Job ends. He started this. We started chapter 12 with a little sarcasm, and he ends it the same way. He says they grope in the dark. They grope in the dark without light, and he maketh them to stagger like a drunken man. In other words, man's wisdom is akin to a man being drunk and staggering around this world. And isn't it the truth? That's just about as good of an analogy as you can get. When you think about the wisdom of man, just think about the wisdom of man in 2022. The wisdom of man. We should be at the pinnacle of knowledge. And yet, on the way to church tonight, I passed a man alone in a car with a mask on. see it all the time. Huh? What I'm saying is this. Listen, it's Job's head is like a man that's drunk. That's staggering around drunk. You know who's always right? You know who's always right? A drunk. God, you said God, didn't you? Yeah, God is always right. But that was being a little rhetorical there. The world's wisdom, they always think they're right. They always think they're right because you know who? Because they're staggering around like a drunk. And a drunk always thinks they're right. And so anyway, we have chapters 13 and 14 concluding Job's thoughts, and we'll get to those the following weeks. Any questions about what we've covered tonight? Any questions about covered tonight? Okay. Yes, sir.
You said that when you began this chapter, this friend of Job was his cruelest friend. Does that mean all of his friends are cruel?
They were.
Better to have cruel friends than none at all.
Well, he said, and I'll quote Job here. Job does not call them cruel. He calls them miserable. He says they're miserable comforters. And they each of them insult Job, but they did it differently. For example, Bildad used his experience, and Zophar used his theology. I mean, he really attacked him, sort of like, beating somebody over the head with the Bible. And that's what Job said. You're miserable comforters, because in all their words, they were condemning of Job. I said this last week. I believe the best thing they could have done for Job is to have hugged his neck and continued just to be silent, and just embraced him and just hugged his neck. That would have went further, I believe, than all the empty words, because essentially that's what God. They also get rebuked by God later on in chapter 42. They get rebuked by God. God said to all three friends, he said, "You've been telling Job that we've been talking. We've been talking." God says to his friends, to Job's friend, "You hadn't heard from me." All the times that they've said, especially Bildad. Bildad said, "God has given me a dream." God said, "You're a liar, Bildad. I did not give you a dream." Ouch. Ouch. Job gets totally vindicated in front of his friends. Amen? But there's a special reason why, and we'll get to that later on in the book of Job. God just does something awesome. All right, any other questions? Any other questions about what we've covered tonight? What a man he was. Amen? Amen. All right, let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, God, we love you. We thank you so much for this time together. God, thank you for the testimony and the life of your servant Job. God, thank you that we get to peek behind the curtain and see how you used him, and help us to be more like Jesus, Father. Help us to study the life of Job. God, help us to apply the precepts and the principles there, Father. Keep us from being fools like his friends, Father. Help us to not be miserable comforters. God, help us to be spiritual comforters one for another. For we love you, we thank you and praise you in Jesus' holy name.